Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome back to my Sims 4 speedrunning video, or welcome to the channel if you are new here. So in today's video I'm going to be building the world of Sulani, which is the world that we got from the expansion pack The Sims 4 Island Living, and I'm going to be building almost like a miniature village of bungalows. So this lot ends up having 3 houses in total, or 3 bungalows in total. We have this first one over here, which this one ends up having 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. There does also end up being a second 2 bedroom 1 bathroom bungalow, and then there is also a 1 bedroom 1 bathroom bungalow. But this week I actually had a bit of a mare, because pretty much the way that this build came together and the way that it just all came to almost like fruition was a little bit strange, because to be completely honest with you, I actually set off building in a completely different world this week, and honestly I spent the first 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, pulling my hair out trying to build something completely different from this. And it was one of them ones where I was stressing. I kept on like changing the wallpapers because I have this vision of something that I want to build, and it just wasn't, you know, sometimes when you try and put your idea into the game and it won't work. That was happening to me early this week, and in the process of that I kept on changing the wallpapers for this particular house that I was building. But in the process I noticed that we have all these different colourful wallpapers from the Horse Ranch expansion pack, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to pop over to Sulani and just see if I can work something up with these wallpapers. Because when I was trying to build what I was initially attempting to build, which for a little bit of like context, I was trying to build in the world of Chestnut Ridge, and I was trying to build something which I wanted to build literally since the Horse Ranch expansion pack came out, and I just couldn't make it work. And the thing is, if I'm not 100% on something, I'm not gonna do a video on it, because all of my builds that I showcase, I love dearly, and if I'm not feeling it 100%, I'm not going to post it. Anyway, so earlier this week, I was, filtering through all the different wallpapers, came across these beautiful coloured ones from the Horse Ranch DLC, and I was like, I'm going to pop over to Sulani, and I'm just going to have a little, build. And I started building, and in the end, I am just absolutely obsessed with this like little miniature village that I created. Initially I just thought I'm gonna build like a couple little beach shacks or something, and maybe there's got some sorts of community. But as I continued throughout the build, I just really started to get into it, and in the end I'm obsessed with this build. And it's now made me have a bit of a crisis, because now I want to start a brand new save file and have my Sims live in one of these little bungalows, because I'm obsessed with it. And so I really hope you like this build as well. But anyway, moving over from that and actually getting on and talking a little bit more about the build itself, and also what I'm doing right now. So as you can see, I've already built the first bungalow in this almost like a miniature village. And when I say miniature village, by the end of it, I really feel like this lot has some sort of like sense of community, because where I'm building in the world of Sulani, by default, all the Sims that live in this world, they're so friendly, they're so welcoming, and I just thought having like a little village in this little section of the world, it would be so lovely. And so in kind of like the area outside of the little huts, if you want to put it that way, I made sure that there was so many different things that your Sims can interact with, whether it be by themselves or maybe with some of the other fellow residents. Currently right now I'm just figuring out how kind of like I'm gonna landscape around the second bungalow. This little orange one in the middle, this is the one that ends up being a 1 bedroom 1 bathroom. The bungalows themselves, they're all quite small and they're all quite snug, but no, I just absolutely love it, because on the inside I tried to make it feel very like warm and welcoming and just really homey. And even though some of the rooms are a little bit tight for space, I absolutely love this. And like I said, it's just made me want to sit down and play in the world of Sulani again. Now, where I love this build so much, and also I feel like it fits in so perfectly with kind of like this particular neighbourhood in Sulani, I have decided that I'm going to make this build for my save file. And so I have got a little bit of a storyline to go along with kind of like the individual huts or the individual bungalows and kind of like the Sims that live inside of them. The first bungalow that I started off with, you see the yellow one on the left hand side, that one ends up being a little small family home. So it consists of 2 mums and then one of the mum's son. The one in the middle is for a single sim. Was personally imagining a single girlie, you know, she's trying to find herself. She thought she'd move to the world of Sulani, you know, go to yoga retreats and stuff. She lives in the middle one. But then also the last bungalow, which I'm actually yet to build. I'll be building it in just a minute. But that one ends up being for a young guy and his teenage sister that lives with him. Now, I just love this storyline because kind of like the way that I was picturing all of the different individual sims and, you know, like all their different personalities and stuff, it kind of feels like almost like a bit of a TV show, or maybe even potentially a little bit of like a movie, a little bit of a film, because I tried to make the storylines kind of like intertwine with each other. And I imagine all the different individual residents that live in these bungalows, they're all friends, you know, they all get along, and there is maybe a little bit of tension, like romantic kind of tension between some of them. And I love doing storylines like this in residential rentals where you can have multiple different houses live on the same lot, but where they're all kind of under one guideline or one lot boundaries, they will see each other more often, and it makes it feel like this storyline can really just play out so beautifully in the game. But starting off the storyline for the 2 mums and their son, so I'm actually going to be moving a pre-existing family in the world of Sulani into the first bungalow, and it is called the Nata family. Sorry, correction, the Nada. Do you know what? I just looked up a pronunciation of how to say the name, but the bloke is American, and I'm not American. I'm also not a geezer, and so I don't really know how to say it. But it is this family, which you can see I've got a little picture on the screen, who are a pre-existing family that live in the world of Sulani. Now, I must admit, I've given them such a small house in comparison to their original house when you enter a brand new save file. But oh my, have you ever seen their original house? Honestly, I've never given it the time of day because when it comes around to playing the game myself, I don't often look at the pre-existing houses. I just use ones that I've built and, you know, just call it a day. But when it came around to kind of like building their bungalow around their pre-existing like skills and hobbies and traits and stuff, I popped into their original family home. It's huge. It is so empty. Honestly, I feel like the little bungalow that they've got now is more filled out than their original house, which, off memory, I think their original house is built on a 40 by 30 lot, but it's just so empty and just so, honestly, bare and cold in there. And so even though they have downsized quite dramatically, I actually feel like they've got a little bit of a better way of living over here, because at least their house actually feels a little bit more homey. And also another thing for my save file, I have kind of decided to make the original neighbourhood that they live in a little bit more like a honeymoon retreat. That area of the world I've heavily based off kind of like luxury Maldives villas, and so far my save file I've got I think 3 different rentals there so far. Still need to build another 2, but basically I'm trying to make that section into kind of like a honeymoon destination vacation kind of situation. And so I didn't want to have townies living there, and also where they originally live, it backs out into water, which, don't get me wrong, it's beautiful, it's lovely, but I just feel like they were a little bit isolated, and so I kind of wanted to bring them kind of into the heart of Sulani. But starting off with the actual Sims themselves. So like I said, the household has 3 family members. We've got 2 mums and then a son. We have Oliana, and Oliana is basically this Sim who is quite active. She's a little bit jealous, but she is also a little bit of a slob. Always got to have a bit of a bad trait in there, but she is a little bit of a slobbish Sim. And for my save file, I'm going to be making it so she's a personal trainer. Now, when you enter a brand new save, by default, she is a bodybuilder, like that is her career path, but she wants to be, you know, like a big muscly kind of girl, like she wants to go into bodybuilding. And I like the idea for her originally, but then as I started kind of like incorporating different things with different members of this small little village into this lot, I then started thinking about different storyline branches for the other Sims, and one of the other Sims is quite into fitness, and I just thought it'd be really lovely if I decided to make her into a personal trainer. Oleana, and she could kind of, lend her knowledge here and there to that sim. And so, yeah, she's going to be a PT in my save file, but she lives here with her wife, who is called Leela. Now, Leela is a sim who is creative, clumsy, and she loves the outdoors. And when you enter a brand new save file, she's a painter. And for my save, I'm going to be keeping her exactly where she is. I think that suits her beautifully. But basically, the original storyline for these sims is Leela went to the world of Sulani, and I think the Sims team tried to give the impression of that she was coming here maybe for a little bit of a holiday, a little bit of a vacation, but then she found someone who is now her wife. Spoiler alert, they got married, but she found someone, and then she just fell in love with the world of Sulani, and in my mind also like the community around it, that she decided to stay here, get married, and now she is the stepmother of the little boy of the household, who is called Tane. Now, Tane himself, he's just a kid. He's a smarty kid. Like, he just, is a bit of a brainiac. I think by default his original trait is geek off memory, but for his bedroom I gave him like a little computer, and it's got like little post-it notes in it for maybe different like mathematical equations that he wants to solve and stuff. But pretty much the idea that I had for this household is Leela was originally from maybe like Newcrest or maybe like Willow Creek or somewhere, and she came to the world of Sulani, and she was maybe coming here to find some sort of inspiration. She wanted to come here and paint the scenery, maybe she wanted to paint the volcano or the mountains in the distance, and I was picturing that maybe one night she had a little bit of a, I don't want to call like a writer's block, but sometimes if you're a builder in like the game you get builder's block, that but for painting, like painter's block, I don't know what it's called, but she couldn't put basically pen or paint to a canvas, and she was probably just a little bit stuck. And so I was picturing that she went to a bar, kind of wanted to let off some steam and stuff, and she met Oleana. They ended up falling in love, and then they got married, and now they live in the little yellow bungalow. I do end up placing down an art easel on the back section for Leela, because I was thinking that, she still wants to paint from reference, she still wants to paint with the mountains in the distance, and so there is something for her on the back section. There isn't anything for Oleana on like the actual house boundaries, but on one of the neighbouring bungalows there is some stuff which I imagine she asks if she can use quite often, and so there is some stuff there for her as well. I also imagine that Oleana is the kind of sim that would just go for a morning jog around the neighbourhood, and so I can just picture her every single morning waking up, crack of dawn, she has a protein shake, and then she goes for a jog on like the beachfront or something, which I just thought would be so lovely. But in terms of like their actual house, on the front section, and you might just be able to see it, but I placed down some vegetable patches for oversized vegetables, and basically when I was putting them down I was thinking, well, Leela is a painter, she's an artist, and I was thinking, well, she loves the idea of the world of Sulani and kind of like the community and stuff, but I also imagine that this family are very much like they're not maximalist, if you want to put it that way, and they try and use all the different resources around them. And so I was thinking the little garden planters that I put out the front of their bungalow was for different fruits that Leela is growing and she wants to use as some sort of paint in her paintings. Now, I have actually done this idea before in the past of where I've had an artist sim living in, it was actually a penthouse in the world of Ciudad Enamorada, but basically in that penthouse I had so many different garden planters, and I was saying in that video that I imagine that the sim that lived there grew all of these different things to eventually harvest and use in their paintings, which I just thought was a lovely idea. But then so many of you said in the comments that you also do that, or you're an artist yourself, or you've at least heard of people doing that, and I just love that idea. And especially for the world of Sulani, having a little painter who kind of like grows their own paint, I just thought it was really nice. And so I placed down some garden planters in like their little front garden section. I also ended up placing down a little bee box out there as well, and so maybe every single morning Oleana will go outside into the like little beekeeping hut, and maybe she harvests honey, and then maybe she has like a honey and banana protein shake before she goes on like a morning jog or something. I just thought it was a really lovely idea. But either way, as you can see, I've now moved on into the inside. I've started coming in and actually decorating their house. Now, like I said, I have got a storyline for each of the residents in their individual bungalows, and so I'm going to try and keep that until I've actually moved on into their little separate section, just to make it a little bit easier to follow along with, because I also do want to speak about the build and like all the different things that I kind of like implemented into their space. But you can see in this bungalow it's very small, but surprisingly this is the biggest one out of all of them. Unfortunately, where I'm building this to eventually be a residential rental, you can't, I don't think, list these as tiny homes, but I feel like each of these individual houses would definitely pass off as at least a tier 3 tiny home, just because they're all so short and snug, and they're just really homey, and I just really enjoy them. But in the inside, I tried to go for a very kind of like weathered, man-made kind of feel. For the kitchen counters in the kitchen, I decided to use the ones that we got from the Horse Ranch expansion pack, and I'm pretty sure I ended up using them kitchen counters in each of the individual bungalows, but I kind of like changed up the colour swatch. But I decided to use them in green in here, and then for the curtains as well, yeah, I went for these curtains that we got from the 4 Rent expansion pack, and I just really like the contrast of having kind of like the green against the yellow. I just thought it was like a really nice combination between the two. But in terms of like the little seating area in here, so they have a 2-seater love seat and then also a single armchair. Now this household doesn't have anywhere that they can actually sit down and eat a dinner together, but hopefully, as I was like blubbering on about the different individual sims, you might notice outside in kind of like the community section, I made it so there is somewhere for all different members of this community, not even just these sims, but all the different villagers, if I want to put it that way, to kind of sit down and eat a meal together. I placed down the picnic table thing that we got from the Island Living expansion pack, but then I also placed down the bonfire pit, and so if they wanted to, this family, they don't have to sit down and eat like a dinner together. They could go outside and maybe make like a fish feast or some sort of like dinner for all the different residents or something. But in their actual like little lounge kitchen area, I placed down like a little telephone up by the front door, which the telephone that I placed down, it's from base game, but we got it in kind of like a login bonus thing a little while ago. Unfortunately, it's not functional, it's just like a purely decorative object. I really wish the Sims team would actually update that decoration just so your Sims can at least click on it and travel somewhere, or even just call a friend, because you know how we've got mobile phones in like our Sims like imaginary pockets. You can like text on them, you can call people, you can like, set up dates and stuff. I really wish you could have like the telephone options on just that decoration. I just feel like it would just be just so lovely for like wholesome gameplay or something. But either way, moving over, as you can see, I've now moved on into their bathroom. So in here, I use this bathtub, which is from this StrangerVille game pack, and I really struggled for a while trying to figure out what toilet to use. In the end, I just went for like my, I don't want to call it like a staple toilet, but I always use this toilet. It's a base game toilet. It's called the John toilet. It's my favourite one. It's like the most toilet-y looking toilet that we've got in the game, because at this point, surprisingly, we've got so many different toilets in the Sims 4, but we really didn't have any like proper looking like weathered wooden ones. We have one that your Sims can make at the handiness table. I did pull that out at one point, but it looks a little bit too rough. And then there is also another one which is called, I think, Captain something toilet, but then that one looks a little bit too rough but polished. Like it looks like the wood has gone through multiple different phases of being glazed or something. I just didn't like it, so I went for just the John toilet. But in the bathroom, you've got a shower and bath combo, you've got a little toilet, and then you also have a sink, and then also actually something that I placed down to the toilet or bathroom. I call it toilet sometimes because I sometimes refer to a bathroom as a toilet, and I've actually spoken about this before, but I have been in a situation in Toronto Pearson Airport where I went up to someone and I said, "Oh, excuse me, mate, where's your toilet?" And they looked at me like I was just speaking in a completely different language, and they didn't understand what I meant. Bathroom, toilet, same situation. But in the little bathroom section, I placed down this little cleaning caddy. We got it from the kitchen clutter set, and I just thought for a bathroom, it works perfectly in there. And so, I popped it into that room. But now, as you can see, I've now moved on into the first bedroom. So in here, this is the mum's bedroom, and I wanted it to be quite colourful. I went for this bed, which we got from the High School Years expansion pack in this certain colour swatch, which I don't think I've ever used before. It's so beautiful, and I feel like it just fits in with the world of Sulani so perfectly. But then also the actual bed itself, when I spin the camera, you might be able to notice, but the actual bed frame is kind of like wicker, kind of boohoo kind of feeling. I just love it. But in this room, I did also decide to give them a costume chest for, if they wanted to dress up for one another. I popped it in front of their wardrobe, which, if you're curious, your Sims can still interact with that wardrobe and also the costume trunk. I've fully playtested this whole entire lot, like always. I playtest every single one of my builds. I run into one problem, and it was on next door's bungalow. When we move over, I'll tell you about it, because otherwise it might be a bit confusing. But yeah, no, your Sims can still, if they want to, dress up from that little costume trunk thing. But also in their bedroom, there is a little door which leads out onto a balcony, which you would have just seen me furnish. Out there, I placed down an art easel, and then also some painting brushes for Layla when she, when she wants to like paint of an evening, or maybe she wants to paint from reference. When I was playtesting, I wanted to kind of see the paint from reference options, because where I'm building in the world of Sulani is absolutely beautiful, and some of the things that your Sims can paint from reference from that art easel, they're just so lovely. And so yeah, I'm really excited about that. But either way, moving on, as you can see, I've now moved on into the little boy's bedroom. So in here, like I said, the little boy of this household, his name is Tane. He's got the aspiration to be a whiz kid, and he's also a little bit of a geek. And so on his little like computer desk section, I use just like a base game, kind of like blocky old school computer, and then I also moved objects, some little like sticky notes onto it, and then I was thinking maybe they were some sort of like puzzle that he's trying to solve, maybe it's like a mathematical equation or something. I was also thinking that he has a crush on the teenage sister that lives in kind of like this village community on the other side. So I said that one of the households is going to be a boy who lives with his younger sister. His younger sister, I imagine, is a teenager, and I was picturing she's like a really beautiful young girl. Like, she's just so nice. She's just like an all-round really nice person. But I imagined that when Tane was growing up, maybe him and Oliana have always lived in this community. Maybe this is always where they have lived, and Leia just kind of like moved in eventually. But I was thinking that this teenage girl that also lives in this village kind of like babysitted him when he was younger, and even though now he's kind of like at the age where he doesn't need to be babysat anymore, I imagine that he still has some sort of like little childhood crush on this teenager. Obviously just like a childhood crush that he fancies someone or something, but I just thought that'd be like really nice for gameplay. Like, maybe sometimes he goes outside, maybe the village are having some sort of like pulled pork, no, not pulled pork, is it a pulled pork? I don't know, some sort of like little barbecue feast on the bonfire pit, and maybe he like tries to make himself look extra nice and tries to like gel his hair back or something, because he wants to impress this teenager that, they're a teenager, they're not going to be interested. But I just really liked the idea of like a little wholesome crush, when you're growing up or something. But in his room, I tried to make some references to the fact that he is quite a smart little kid. I placed down the scientific poster on one section of his room, and then also placed down a few different like bits and bobs just to kind of like fill it out and make it feel a little bit more kid-like. But either way, moving on, as you can see, I've now moved on into the next bungalow, which this is the one for a single sim. So over here, I'm just currently coming in and placing down a little book onto this love seat. Now, when I was playtesting it, this is the one issue that I've run into, and pretty much my sims, sometimes when you get them to sit down on a sofa, I always, whenever I playtest, I get them to sit down on the left-hand side, get them to go somewhere else, come back to the sofa, sit on the other side. Because sometimes when you get your sim to sit down on a sofa and then you get them to move to the other side, they'll like scoot over, which is lovely because, it lets you know that you can actually sit there. But then getting it to and from the sofa sometimes is what I want to playtest. And unfortunately, because the windows that I used on this build were kind of like shutter ones that you pull out, it made it so my sim couldn't just like sit straight down on the right hand side of the love seat. At first I thought it was the little book that I moved objects into, but yeah, no, it was the windows. It was because the window kind of has this shutter that kind of like leans out. It's beautiful and I didn't want to change it, and so unfortunately with playtesting I did run into that issue, and your sims can't freely sit down on both sides of the sofa. But I mean, they can still sit down, just someone's got to scoot their bum over before the other person sits down. But either way, as you can see, moving on, in here, this is a very small little kitchen that I'm decorating, and like I said, I imagine that the sim that lives in this house is going to be for a single girl. Now, the storyline that I've got for this sim, this is where it kind of feels a little bit like a film or a TV show or something, because I've made it quite in-depth, because pretty much I started off with the fact that I wanted someone who has recently moved to the neighbourhood to live in this one particular little bungalow, and I was thinking about all the different possibilities, but then I settled on the fact that the girl that now lives here, she has family heritage in the world already. because the thing is, where I'm building the world of Sulani, it's very like community based. It's very like everyone loves each other. There is such a sense of community, and I want to kind of keep all the townies to be almost like natives to the world itself. And I was thinking, I love this idea, but I also want someone to have, you know, recently moved in from somewhere else. And then I settled on the idea of, well, what about if this sim, she didn't like grow up in the world of Sulani, but her grandma used to live in this world. I was personally picturing the scenario of maybe she grew up in, say, like Oasis Springs, for example. You know, she went to elementary school there, she went to high school there. She kind of had her whole entire life in a completely different world, but her family originated from the world of Sulani, and when she was growing up, she used to go on summer vacations to this world to visit her grandma. And I was thinking that maybe when she used to come here over summer vacation, she used to be so happy, just like, you know, like playing in the water, going on all like the little jet skis and stuff, and just, she loved the culture of Sulani. But then fairly recently, her grandma sadly passed away. That is the first hurdle that she ran into, all right? And imagine it left her absolutely heartbroken. But then the second hurdle that she's recently run into in her almost like quarter-life crisis is that she was with a partner who she thought she was going to be with till the end of time, you know, probably like high school sweethearts or something, probably thought they were going to one day get married, get a mortgage, have kids, the whole full shebang. Like, this girl was infatuated by this sim. I imagine that she had almost like her whole life kind of like planned out, and then her grandma passed away. But then the second thing is, I imagine that one day, and it's actually going to be so tragic and so like dramatic, but it makes for a good storyline. But I was thinking that she also had a really good close group of friends that she loved dearly and probably also grew up with, and one day she found out that her partner that she thought was, you know, absolute going to be sweethearts, going to be sitting in rocking chairs when they were 8 years old, was actually having an affair with her best friend. Which, can't even picture how horrendous her life must have been at this like certain like time frame, this point in her life. But yeah, her beloved grandma, who she loved so dearly, who she's got so many fond memories with, had passed away. Obviously would have left her absolutely like shaken to the core. But then she found out that another section of her life, which is not only her partner, but then also her best friend, like her, you know, I imagine best friend since like maybe kindergarten or something, had also secretly been having an affair with her partner. And I imagine that she was absolutely distraught, as anyone would be. I mean, Gordon Benny, I couldn't even imagine it. But I was thinking that she decided, do you know what? I'm going to move out of the apartment that they probably shared together or something, and I'm going to move to where I know that I'm going to be happy, which is the world of Sulani. I imagine that she kind of like settled into this world, started going on like yoga retreats, wellness retreats. I placed down like a little meditation stool on her front porch. I imagine that she's wounded, bless her heart, as anyone would be. And I imagine that she's had a really tough time recently, and she's now got her guard up so much because, you know, one person in her life that was her partner shattered her heart, but then the other person that was kind of like closest to her, next to her partner, her best friend, also was a part of shattering her heart. And so she now lives in this little like village community, and she's really got her guard up. However, next door, her neighbour, the one that lives in this house, is quite an attractive sim, and also is a sim that is kind of doing anything and everything to kind of win her. Now, I say quite an attractive sim, it's going to be quite nice to look at in the eyes, but I was personally picturing that the sim who is going to be her neighbour and also another resident of this little community is this man that lives here with his younger sister, and this guy, he's just like a regular Sulani resident, you know. I imagine that he is a manual labourer, he goes to work every single day, 9 to 5, you know, like the proper like workman get up that they wear, like the little ivies and little like bucket hat. That's him every single morning. Imagine that the neighbour, the young girl, she probably finds it quite attractive, but she's been wounded. She does not want to do anything in regards to relationships, friendships at this point. Like she's happy by herself, writing in her little journal, drinking her matcha, going doing yoga and meditating of a morning. Like she doesn't want to have anything like that. She has been hurt. But imagine that the sim that lives in this house, he is such a big part of the Sulani community, and he's just someone that everyone is friendly with. Like everyone has nothing but good things to say about this sim. I imagine that him and his sister had lost their parents when they were quite young, but he was probably old enough. I say quite young. I imagine they probably lost their parents when he was maybe around about 17, turning maybe around about 18 kind of age. And so he was still really young, you know, he's still a teenager, but he was old enough to kind of take his sister under his wing, kind of like bring his sister up as a parent. And so I imagine him and his sister who live in his house, they are like, so I'm putting my two fingers together like when you promise, but they are proper tight knit. They are so close because he's kind of been both the mum and the dad, or just both parents to his younger sister. But yeah, I imagine that this man, he's so nice, he's so friendly, he will help anyone out without like a click of a finger. He will be there, he will be just so lovely to anyone. And he's kind of got this bit of a crush on this woman, on this single girl that's moved next door. But he understands that she's been through a lot recently and he, you know, probably shouldn't do anything about it. But they both fancy each other, but there's just a lot of tension there. And just because, bless her heart, girl's been through a lot recently, she doesn't want to get into anything. And so I imagine like all the different neighbours of this community kind of like know about it. And I was personally picturing Leah, one of the mums that lives in the little yellow bungalow, she would be particularly close with the single girl, whereas Oleana would be really close with the man that lives in his house. You know, I said that I didn't put any like fitness equipment or anything in regards to Oleana being a PT for her job. There is a boxing bag that you don't actually see me place down in the build because, if I'm honest, completely forgot about the balcony, but you'll notice in the screenshots I placed down a boxing bag onto his balcony from his bedroom. And I was thinking that Oleana is maybe helping him out in kind of like regards to fitness recently, and so she'll come over, she'll kind of like train him as he's like punching the bag and stuff, and they will talk about it. But then also I feel like this man could also speak to Leah about it, and I imagine that Leah is someone who is more of a gentle approach. Imagine that Oleana would be someone that would be like, oh, just say it how it is kind of situation. Whereas I imagine that Leah would be a little bit more like gentle approach. And maybe she also talks to the single girl about it. I mean, Leah herself, she's someone that, she was an artist. She came to Sulani, I imagine, on some sort of like vacation to get some sort of inspiration one day. And she ended up finding love. And so I imagine that even though she hasn't got the traits of being a love bug, she would definitely, if I could eventually get her to have the love bug trait, she would definitely have that, because I imagine that she loves love, and I imagine that she wants them to be together. And I imagine everyone in the community probably wants them to be together, but I mean, the young girl, she's had her heart broken, she's lost her best friend, and she's also recently lost her grandma, and so she's just in a little bit of a rut. But yeah, that is the storyline for all the different Sims that are going to live in this little village for my save file. I absolutely love it. It's a little bit sad, I will admit, and it's a bit dramatic as well, but I just thought for a storyline to play out, how fun would that be to be either you want to play it as the guy that lives in this house, by the way, this is his bedroom, but you play as the guy and you could try and, you know, shower this person with so much affection. You could try and do all these good deeds to try and show that not every single person is a bad person. Not everyone is going to, you know, have an affair, or not everyone is out to basically harm you. There is actually still some good people left. Or if you wanted to, you could play it as the single girl who is now quite romantically reserved. But either way, moving over and actually getting back and talking about the build, as you can see, and like I just mentioned, I'm currently just coming in and actually decorating the young guy's bedroom. So like I said, he has got a balcony, which when I was filming, complete mind blank, I completely forgot about it, and so you won't see any footage of me actually placing anything down onto the balcony. But if you watch the screenshots, you'll see there ends up being a little boxing bag, and then also a few different plants, but then also an American football, you know, one of the ones that like proper like American jockey kind of ones. Place one of them down into the balcony, and I was thinking that him and his younger sister, maybe sometimes they like to throw a ball about together. Maybe they go down onto the beachfront and like play partly on sand, partly in the water or something. But also actually out there, I placed down a swing set, and I was thinking, you know how I said that Tane, the young boy that lives in this little village, he used to be babysat by this girl who sleeps in this room. I imagine that sometimes he will go outside and ask if he can use their swing set, and then maybe they'll have a little chit chat and he'll kind of like confess his love to this teenager, and she's like, mate, maybe in a few years kind of situation. But yeah, that is the storyline for this build. But either way, as you can see, I'm pretty much just coming in now and actually finishing up the young girl's bedroom. I'll use this desk, which is from the high school years expansion pack, and I've never used this desk in like a residential house before. It's like meant to be for high schools, but for this build it had like little sketches of like little drawn hearts and stuff, and I thought it was absolutely perfect. But other than that, I'm going to go around the build, finish it off, and that is pretty much it. So anyway guys, I'm going to end this voiceover right here. As always, you can download this build via the gallery. My gallery ID is JessicapieYT, or you can just search for the hashtag JessicapieYT or just the hashtag Jessicapie. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, if you do like my content then please do subscribe, and hopefully I will see you in my next Sims 4 speedbuilding video. Bye guys.